committee's third nomination hearing for this Congress. And this is an important one. This is a hearing involving two people who will help run the two departments that this committee oversees. We'll receive testimony from these two distinguished nominees for the office of these two Deputy Secretary appointments, the Department of Interior and the Department of Energy. Each of these nominees has previously been confirmed by the Senate after having been reported favorably out of this committee. Each served honorably in their respective offices. The two individuals are therefore no strangers to this committee. Katherine McGregor, nominated to be the Deputy Secretary of the Department of the Interior, and James Danley, nominated to be Deputy Secretary of Energy. Both nominees deserve to be confirmed, and each has my strong support. I thank President Trump for sending these nominees to the Senate for confirmation. In both the Department of the Interior and the Department of Energy, the Deputy Secretary functions as sort of the chief operating officer, responsible for a lot of the day-to-day management and function of each of these departments, departments that involve complex, sprawling series of agencies that directly affect the lives of 330 million Americans. At Interior, the Deputy Secretary helps oversee nearly 70,000 employees, a $14 billion budget, and it manages 500 million acres, a staggering 1/5 of our nation's land, and it's roughly 2/3 of the sprawling 28% of the total land mass owned by the United States government throughout our country. So this role requires supervising the development of all sorts of things and managing this entity. It involves being the largest supplier and manager of water in 17 states, of upholding trust responsibilities to 574 federally recognized American Indian tribes and Alaska Natives. Ms. MacGregor has done this work before, and she's done it well in this position. In her previous tenure as Deputy Secretary, she oversaw efforts to ensure responsible domestic energy and mineral development on public lands and waters, reduce permitting timeframes, and implement the department's COVID-19 operational response. She brings a wealth of private sector and public sector experience, including her most recent role at NextEra Energy, giving her a broad perspective on energy development, environmental protection, and regulatory reform. At the Department of Energy, the Deputy Secretary plays a similarly critical role. That department's tasked with maintaining a safe, secure, and effective nuclear deterrent, reducing the threat of nuclear proliferation, overseeing the United States energy supply, carrying out the environmental cleanup from the Cold War nuclear mission, and managing 17 national laboratories. The department literally keeps the lights on. We've seen Mr. Danley's work at the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, both as General Counsel and later as Chairman and as a Commissioner, of course. We've read his dissents, his statements, and his warnings, particularly about the dangers of distorting markets and over-relying on intermittent sources of electric power. His legal and regulatory record demonstrates a consistent commitment to statutory interpretation grounded in the text of the law and a deep understanding of the grid's physical and economic realities. Beyond his professional credentials, Mr. Danley brings a record of service and sacrifice. As a former Army officer, he served 2 tours in Iraq and was awarded the Bronze Star and the Purple Heart. I look forward to hearing from both nominees today. Their roles are vital, their responsibilities immense, and their decisions that they make in these jobs will reverberate throughout the American West and, of course, the nation at large. With that, I now recognize Senator Heinrich for his opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman, and welcome Ms. MacGregor and Mr. Danley. Before we get to committee business, I do want to address the troubling reports that DOE is considering canceling or renegotiating existing funding contracts with companies, some of which are already under construction. As I wrote to Secretary Wright in a letter a week ago, I will remind Mr. Danley and Ms. MacGregor today, the decision to rescind these awards rests with Congress, not with the President, and certainly not with Elon Musk. However, even before these so-called kill lists were leaked, we already started seeing the economic impact of the administration's reckless actions. It's estimated that more than 50,000 energy jobs have already been lost under Trump's watch. The administration's actions are also constricting the fastest growing and most affordable power sources, just as demand for manufacturing and data center growth is surging. This means that energy costs will soar. Electricity prices are already on track to be the highest they have been since the 1990s, and terminating projects in the name of energy dominance is not only ludicrous, it will lead to higher energy costs directly for households. All of this is only the newest phase in the administration's campaign of chaos at federal agencies and actions that are raising energy costs. Both the Interior and Energy departments have been subject to whiplash in just the last 2 months, from illegally firing thousands of employees only to be required by courts to rehire them, to announcements that agency buildings would be closed or sold, or in some cases now maybe not, to freezing grant funds and canceling contracts in contravention of federal law only to see some unfrozen while others still remain inexplicably frozen. This has got to be about the least efficient way to run a government. For the Department of Interior, all of this mismanagement has real on-the-ground impacts for people and communities. We've seen closed visitor centers and overflowing trash cans at parks, field offices that have shorter hours, and it's harder for people to reach frontline staff when they have questions. Small businesses are worried if their permits will get processed. Scientists are struggling to cover expenses because the federal government has backed out of contracts with them, and our public lands, which are the birthright of every single American. However, if something doesn't change, and soon at the agencies that care for these public lands, we could lose that birthright. I have a number of questions today for both of these nominees for Energy and the Interior Department. Both departments were created by statute. They were not created by the whim of the President. They do not exist at the President's pleasure. The laws they execute, the programs they administer, the funds they spend were enacted, created, appropriated by law by Congress. I will be looking for assurances from both nominees that they are committed to following the law. And I hope to hear how they will get these departments returned back to a path of public service, back on track, securing American leadership and competitiveness, and the responsible stewardship of our natural resources. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, let's now turn to our witnesses for their testimonies. Before your opening testimony, I'd like to swear you both in. If you both stand. You swear that the testimony that you're about to give to the committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. All right. We'll now have opening statements. We'll hear first from Ms. MacGregor and then from Mr. Danley. And while you're speaking, feel free to introduce any family that you've got here with you. You may proceed, Ms. MacGregor.
Thank you, Chairman Lee, Ranking Member Heinrich, and members of the committee. I thought I had escaped D.C., but as you all know, sometimes life presents you with different paths, and I'm both honored and humbled that President Trump has once again nominated me for the position of Deputy Secretary of the Department of the Interior. As a true hockey family, we've packed the proverbial stands this morning, and I'm blessed to be joined by my family and friends, including representatives of the 2004 University of Pennsylvania varsity women's crew team, members of the best women's hunting group this side of the Mississippi, my best Alaskan fishing and baking buddy, my favorite astronaut, and several individuals who have been amazing mentors to me in my professional career. Finally, and most importantly, I'm joined by my parents, Jean and Peter MacGregor, my aunt and uncle, Sheila and Dick Sanford, and my brother, Robert, and his wife, Michelle. The three of us are the MacGregor hockey line on the congressional hockey team. When I testified here over 5 years ago, I explained my focus to achieve balance in managing America's public lands, cultural treasures, and natural resources in order to advance the priorities of our president. I understand the deep personal connections that so many people have to the lands and resources managed by Interior. But in my work in Congress and at Interior, I also learned firsthand how the decisions we make in Washington impact American families and businesses far away from DC, sometimes for generations. I remember Senator King telling me a story about traveling with his grandchildren in an RV to visit some of our nation's parks, and it makes me smile because I absolutely remember picnics with my grandparents and cousins at Valley Forge National Park in Pennsylvania. These are the happy memories that make us smile even long after our loved ones have passed. But I also remember the tough stories of resource management plan delays impeding economic development in rural America, or a woman denied justice simply because law enforcement could not reach her due to weather, and of course there was no road. For the last 4 years, I've been one of those people watching DC from afar, all while falling in love with Florida. From the dangerous beauty of the Everglades and the invasive species issues we face, the importance of being prepared for natural disasters like hurricanes and wildfires, the incredible abundance of our offshore waters, the thrilling call of an Osceola turkey as you watch the world wake up from inside a hunting blind, or even just the stunning red-orange glow of Jupiter Lighthouse at sunset, which is managed by the BLM. More importantly, in my time in the private sector, I've learned a lot. I've worked on environmental permitting and compliance for almost every type of energy infrastructure project around our great nation, and I've grown to appreciate the far-reaching consequences of decisions made in Washington, the durability of those decisions, and the timeliness of agency action. As we all know, if there's a federal nexus, there's a federal official somewhere saying yes or no, or in the worst case, just not responding. What I've concluded from outside of DC is that the American people, your constituents, deserve better. I cannot imagine any instance where it's just and right that someone wait over 30 years for the authority to build a road to connect their community to better services, over 20 years for a habitat conservation plan, 15 years for a final resource management plan, or over a decade for a pastor in rural Arkansas to be able to continue to bury his deceased parishioners in their 100-year-old churchyard only because the land appraisal for a congressionally authorized land exchange sat on someone's desk. It's simply unacceptable, and frankly, it breaks my heart. This is why so many rural Americans feel like their government has forgotten them. Don't get me wrong, I've heard really great stories too. I was so proud to learn that several of the cold case offices that we established under President Trump's initiative to address missing and murdered Native American and Alaska Native women and children had solved several cases after many years. Many of you on the dais helped us with this initiative. Sadly, these little victories seem too infrequent. We need to turn that around. Roads not built, cases left unsolved, appraisal backlogs, obstacles to public hunting and fishing. These are the reasons I would like to return to Interior. I'd like to come back to drive change and efficiency. And in doing so, I hope we can once again make a difference for the people who rely upon us to show up and do our jobs. I'm honored to have met with many of you and learn about the many missions at Interior that are important to you personally and to your constituents. If confirmed, I will always keep at the forefront of my mind the needs of the American people. After all, it is they who are ultimately watching us here in DC, and they're hoping for us to work together, consider their needs, and frankly, get things done in Washington. Thank you again for having me here today, and I'd be more than happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ms. MacGregor. Mr. Danley.
Thank you, Chairman Lee, Ranking Member Heinrich, and members of the committee. It's an honor to appear before you again today. I sit before you humbly as President Trump's nominee for Deputy Secretary of the Department of Energy. Before I get to my comments, I just want to recognize my family and friends. Behind me sits my wife, Frankie. The last time I appeared before the committee, just like this time, my son, James, who's an active, talkative, rambunctious 10-year-old, is not in attendance, but he is watching, I'm told, the hearing as it's happening. For both Frankie and James, I want to recognize the sacrifices that families of the people who serve in public service make. Those sacrifices are profound. So thank you both, Frankie and James, for your support and indulgence over the years that I've been in government and when I was in the Army, especially when I was in Iraq. I also have friends here, including colleagues throughout my career, among them the lawyers who first taught me energy law and my advisors from my time at the Commission. As the committee is aware, the Department of Energy performs a number of critical functions. The national labs ensure that the United States is and remains at the cutting edge of science and technology. The department is responsible for taking care of and auditing and overseeing the weapons stockpile. It manages environmental cleanup at legacy waste sites, and it promotes the development and deployment of energy sources and infrastructure. I believe that my prior roles as General Counsel, Commissioner, and Chairman at the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission give me a unique and important vantage point on how to achieve the President and Secretary's shared vision of ensuring affordable, reliable, and secure energy for the American people. The utility and natural gas sectors, the subjects I regulated while at FERC, are a critical component to achieving those goals. Right now, we face profound challenges. Demand for energy is growing, and we cannot face the difficulty in producing and delivering it to Americans to ensure the country's safety and prosperity without tackling a number of very difficult problems. There are also great opportunities. America is blessed with the most abundant energy in the world. We have the best technical minds to harness that potential, and we have a private sector that stands ready to invest capital, build infrastructure, and produce the energy that we desperately need. We stand on the brink of an energy renaissance in which we can replace growing energy scarcity at home and abroad with energy abundance for the United States and its allies, improving the lives of our citizens while ensuring our geostrategic position. There are a couple of subjects that I'd just like to touch on before I finish. First, our energy problems and scarcity are driven in large measure by failure to develop needed infrastructure. America struggles to build things these days. We have an acute need to build all manner of infrastructure across the country, but the federal permitting regime has become an impediment to that development. Interminable delays, legal challenges that threaten the permits that are already issued, and a continuously changing regulatory landscape have come to chill investment. And the result of that is that projects take longer to build and are increasingly expensive, or worse than that, they never get built in the first place. It will be difficult to achieve our goals of ensuring affordable, reliable, and secure energy to the American people without tackling the problem of federal permitting. Second, and relatedly, we have an acute need for electric generation. The United States is experiencing unprecedented demand for electricity, and that demand is increasing at an accelerating rate. Data centers, AI, and reindustrialization have brought load onto the system at a speed that we have never seen before. Maintaining our strategic position in the world absolutely requires that Americans have access to affordable, reliable, and secure energy in abundance. I've spent the better part of a decade directly regulating the energy markets and the reliability of the bulk electric system, and I can report that we have systematically failed to compensate baseload generation in order to ensure the retention of existing assets and to incentivize the arrival of the new generators that we need to meet the growing demand. This challenge has to be solved. Third and finally, we need to recommit ourselves to America's preeminence as the world's leader in science and technology. The national labs, which are the crown jewel of the department, have been the source of countless advances over the years, both in pure and applied science. These advances and discoveries have driven commercial development, spawned new industries, and ensured American prosperity. Recently, the national labs have made advances in quantum computing, nuclear reactors, and fundamental scientific research that promise a new era of science and engineering. We have to recommit to that mission to ensure that America continues to maintain its scientific and technological edge that the citizens of the United States have relied upon for so many decades. Again, Chairman Lee, Ranking Member Heinrich, and members of the committee, I appreciate the opportunity to appear before you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Danley. I agree with all of what you said in your opening statement on the topics that most Americans think about when they think about the Department of Energy, things like infrastructure and permitting reform and electricity power generation. I want to focus, though, on the last thing you mentioned there, the national labs, which overlaps with my work as chairman of the Intelligence Committee. I think a lot of Americans probably don't appreciate that the Department of Energy is in charge of all these national labs that do exquisite research into nuclear energy or quantum computing, artificial intelligence, and other things. I think they'd be shocked to know that last year, 40,000 foreigners visited these national labs, and fully 1/5 of those, 8,000, were from Russia and China. Doesn't seem to be like the smartest step to be letting Russian and Chinese scientists into our national labs. What do you think, Mr. Danley?
Yeah, of course, Senator, I completely agree with that. And when you say the word visited, we don't just mean passing through. We mean actually conducting science in close proximity to the scientists that are already working at the labs. The national labs are fundamental not just to the research and science that I mentioned a second ago, but they also have national security missions. And it is, when I first learned about the number of adversarial nations scientists that are at the national labs, I was so surprised by it that I thought at first that I didn't hear correctly. It was shocking, the number. And it's not just a matter of losing the scientific and technical edge I talked about, it's also a matter of grave national security interest that has to be looked at and if necessary, dealt with.
I think most Americans would be shocked to know that 1 out of every 5 foreign scientists visiting our national labs were from China and Russia. And also, although not in its large numbers, they come from places like Iran and Cuba and North Korea as well. Do you know how many American scientists get to go to Russia and China's equivalents of national labs?
None.
The answer would be 0. That does not seem to me to be reciprocal, to use a term that the president likes. That's why on the Intelligence Committee for years, it's been a matter of bipartisan concern that our national labs seem to allow these scientists in. They almost seem to compete to bring them in because the decisions are made at the lab level, not at the level of what you might call the headquarters element of the Department of Energy, drawing on your own intelligence unit and the intelligence community more broadly. I have legislation to address this problem. I bet a lot of the problem, though, can be addressed by you and the Secretary. So can I get your commitment, Mr. Danley? You'll take a look at the legislation. You'll see what needs to be done to address this threat and do as much as you can with your existing authorities once confirmed?
Absolutely. If I should be lucky enough to be confirmed, I'll work with you to deal with this problem.
Thank you. The second topic I want to address, again, something that a lot of Americans probably don't think about when they think about the Department of Energy, is the National Nuclear Security Administration, NNSA. But it's about half of the department's budget. They do a lot of very important work for our nuclear weapons arsenal, a lot of research, a lot of production. One thing in particular that they do is the production of plutonium pits for nuclear weapons. We've had a challenge with this for years. We were supposed to get to the point where we could produce 80 new plutonium pits by 2030 under the Biden administration. That slipped to 2035. Can I get your commitment that you'll advocate for NNSA to get all the budgetary resources it needs to perform its vital mission?
So the NNSA is one of the fundamental elements of American national security. The weapon stockpile is the ultimate instrumentality of sovereignty for the United States, and I commit to doing everything I can to ensure, should I be confirmed, that NNSA's mission is discharged fully.
And specifically trying to get back to 80 pits? What they need to do so in the New Mexico and South Carolina facilities? So
I am not certain, because I am not at the Department of Energy, what the necessity is regarding the rate or level of pit production, but it is fundamental to our weapon stockpile, and I absolutely commit to doing everything I can to ensure that the duties are discharged.
Okay. Thank you. Senator Heinrich.
Thank you. Ms. MacGregor, I want to start with you. During your time, both on the transition team or since you've been nominated to be Deputy Secretary, have you engaged in any discussions about proposed sales of public land with either Department of Interior or transition team personnel?
Senator, while I did gladly serve on the transition team as a volunteer in my personal capacity, I did sign an NDA related to that work. However, I can tell you currently and in my current position, no, I did not engage in conversations regarding sales of public lands.
If confirmed, can you commit that any public land disposals will fully comply with existing federal laws like the Federal Land Policy Management Act and the Federal Land Transaction Facilitation Act?
Sir, absolutely. I fully intend, if confirmed, to obey the law.
That brings me to a related question, which is the department is currently failing to disperse grant funding that a federal judge has ruled must be dispersed. If you're confirmed, will you work to ensure that the department follows federal court orders?
Sir, I'm not familiar with that particular case. However, I know in our discussions in your office, we got into several of those subjects, and I know they're very important to you, and absolutely I will commit to working with you on that.
The Great American Outdoors Act is a very positive example of how this committee and Congress as a whole worked in a very bipartisan fashion with President Trump and with previous secretaries of Interior to provide permanent funding to the Land and Water Conservation Act. And that has had an impressive impact on states across the West, particularly in protecting and expanding hunting and fishing access, something I know that you are very passionate about, and wildlife habitat. Can we count on you to continue to carry out this law and support this conservation legacy that, that this committee and President Trump established in 2020?
Sir, I'm overjoyed for you to highlight one of the issues that you've worked with President Trump on, and absolutely we would love to work with you on further implementation of that act.
Mr. Danley, I want to start with an easy one for you. How do you feel about visiting Sandia and Los Alamos National Labs?
As we talked about in your office, sir, I cannot wait for the opportunity. I love the national labs.
That's the right answer. You mentioned permitting reform, and I was really glad to hear you bring that up because I think it was one of the high watermarks on this committee in the previous Congress. But it is, not something that we've gotten all the way to the president's desk. It's not something that we've been able to get through both houses of Congress in the same Congress. What are your thoughts on the product that this committee produced in the previous Congress and the importance, I would say even necessity, of coming together around a permitting reform package to accomplish some of the goals that you articulated?
So, Senator, I truly appreciate the effort that the committee went through before in trying to streamline and speed up permitting. Just the briefest glance at my separate statements at the commission shows how important this is throughout the time that I was at FERC. I don't actually know the specific bills because there were a bunch of different ones that were moving around, and we who are not in Congress have difficulty tracking everything that's happening. But there were elements of several of the iterations that I thought were very promising, and just as I have always said before to the committee, any help anybody wants with thoughts from me on permitting reform, I am happy to assist. I have to pick and choose here because I'm running short on time.
Ms. MacGregor, while you were at the Department of Interior, the number of forest acres treated for wildfire resilience by the BLM saw some modest increases. However, from 2021 to 2023, the BLM treated nearly 50% more acres for wildfire. And that wasn't by accident. It was because this committee funded, in particular in both the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act, you created funding streams to be able to deal with forest resilience and prepare to make sure that wildfires are not catastrophic when they do occur. Can you commit to continuing to implement the infrastructure bill and the IRA programs that are focused strictly on wildfire risk reduction?
Sir, I was alluding to that conversation earlier, but I absolutely can commit to working with you on everything related to forest management. I know it's extremely important to so many on this committee. It's really important to a lot of humans living in the wildland fire interface, and it was absolutely a priority of President Trump the last time.
Thank you.
Senator Justice.
Well, let me lead off by just saying just this. Whether it be any of you, any on the other side of the aisle, anybody on our side, anybody, there's nobody here that loves hunting and fishing, our public lands all across this unbelievable country. There's no one here that worships wildlife habitat more than I. Nobody. And with all that being said, I've got to just put out a plea more than anything. I want all of us to realize the magnitude of the problem that is right on our doorstep. That's all there is to it. Right on our doorstep. As far as forestry management, I'm all in, 100%. On and on and on and on and on. But the problem that is facing us today, and we better listen to this white-haired guy from West Virginia, and it's just this. We have an energy problem that is astronomical, and it's going to be so important and so big that we better get at trying to do something with all in us to address this situation. Because it's coming not like a freight train, it's coming like Mr. Danley said to me on the phone. It's coming like bigger than absolutely the demand of World War II, bigger than any time in our history. And absolutely, Ms. MacGregor and Mr. Danley, we appreciate so much, and you're going to do great. You're absolutely going to be confirmed. Absolutely, I am all in. But with that, I would say to everyone, okay, it's time to step up. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? A year and a half from today, absolutely our grid and everything and the demand, we cannot handle it. We can't handle it. I don't care what you say. You're going to have an electricity meltdown in this country. And it's coming, and you're going to have to make a decision. America, you're going to have to make this decision. And this is all there is to it. We're either going to stick and say, well, we're going to protect our homes, or we're going to protect energy and our job opportunities. What are you going to do? Because you can't do them both. There's no way. There is no way, whether it be that side of the aisle, this side of the aisle, any of y'all, these nominees, absolutely, if we don't do something now, right now, you talk about up Duke Creek. Now, you're there. You're there, America. And absolutely, if you don't watch out, what will happen is just this. We will have to defer to people of the world that are not our allies, but they're our adversaries. We're going to either have to say, okay, you have the leg up. You have the leg up, not America. That's what is going to happen, and it's going to happen soon. So all of us, you know, our national labs, we protect with all in us. We do everything we possibly can, but we've got to get at the absolute issue at hand, and that is just this. We absolutely, there is no way that if we don't get moving and get moving really quickly, that we're not going to have a colossal problem. Now, the last thing I'll add is just this. You know, I'm from little old West Virginia, but little old West Virginia along the way has gotten it right on energy over and over and over. And little old West Virginia along the way stepped up when we had to have them really step up, really step up. You know, whether it be these terrible world wars that we had or whatever it may be. We've always stepped up, and we do know a lot about what we're talking about energy. So I congratulate both of you. I really don't have a question for either one of you. I know your testimony is rock solid. I've talked with both of you. I absolutely believe in both of you, and I just congratulate you on being here. And I'd say, for God's sakes of living, let's go. Let's go. We got to do something. Let's go. Thank y'all for being here.
Thank you, Senator Justice. I also agree you should always listen to white-haired men from West Virginia, especially this white-haired man from West Virginia, because I could have given your same remarks, just not as eloquently as you did. Senator Wyden.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I have questions for both of you. I'm going to begin with you, Mr. Danley. I believe you know that I'm the author of the technology-neutral clean energy tax credits. And they have worked out so well in the private sector that 21 House Republicans are making it very clear they want them to stick around. And they've said it very explicitly. Now, your role in this, and people don't much know this, is pretty important here because you guys have the science and Treasury's got the taxes. So we got to kind of get you guys in sync. And that's why I need to start with asking you, for the record, do you believe that the IRA tax credits have brought more private sector investment into the energy space?
Thank you for the question, Senator. And of course, you and I spoke about this when I visited you in your office. Do I believe that it brought more investment? I
The reason I'm
can't
asking
be certain
is
about that.
21 House Republicans think that it sure as hell has.
I understand that. It is impossible to run the counterfactual to know what investment would have occurred had those tax credits not been there. Certainly, the tax credits had an effect on the capital markets. They always do. Every tax regime has a tendency to bias or favor one use of capital over another, as we discussed.
Now, as a kind of economic proposition, more choices, like the clean energy tax credits, mean more competition and the opportunity to hold down costs and prices. Do you share that view?
The details of any particular incentive regime matter to that answer, and I'm not certain. But if we were to take that to its logical extension, that would mean 100% taxation rate and 100% incentive rate would yield the best possible outcome, and of course that's not true. So actually getting the levels of incentive right to achieve the objective that Congress has, which of course is Congress's authority, that's an Article I function. I don't quibble with any of that. I just don't know what the counterfactual would be for investment.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to hold the record open to give you some examples where it's clear that can help lower prices. More choices, more competition. We'll go back and forth on examples because I think I got more of them than you do. Thank you.
Thank you.
We go to you, Ms. MacGregor. I appreciated our visit. I didn't get a chance to talk about one forestry issue that I feel very strongly about, and that is doing more prescribed burns, because we got to get out there and get serious about this granular material and all the stuff that we hear from the experts. Senator Manchin, a group of us on a bipartisan basis worked on this. We've made a start, but I'm of the view that we have to dramatically increase the focus of the federal government, and you'd be in a position to do something, about it, need to increase this, because in our part of the world, if we don't get out there in the cold weather kind of months, which is one of the reasons these cutbacks have been so harmful, we do our best prescribed burn work when it's cold, and you can get in there and you can get both sides, labor and business, environmentalists, and you can really make big strides. But now we've reduced the number of people we got, and that hurt us when we've had some cold weather when we could have been out there. And we got you here who can tell us that, yes, I want everybody to know on a bipartisan basis I'm serious about prescribed burns making a bigger difference in terms of fighting these infernos that we have today. And in our part of the world, they are not fires. They are not your grandfather's fires. They're infernos, and we need this prescribed burn. Your thought?
First, Senator, I just wanted to thank you for spending time with me. I loved our conversation, and I also enjoyed your thoughts on grazing as well, and how that can be used as a management tool. And I know that that's something that's been important on this committee. How about you and I go out with the drip torch and get to work?
I'm going to quit while I'm ahead. I thank my colleagues, and there is tremendous interest on a bipartisan basis in this prescribed burn issue. The question is the urgency, of it. Everybody's got their kind of laundry list in terms of, our part of the world. We're 3,000 miles from Washington, D.C. We want people to be actually hearing us, and it sounds like you're open to further discussions. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate your patience with me. I've got multiple committee assignments that are pulling me in 3 different directions. I may have to leave later for another committee hearing, but bear with us on that. Ms. MacGregor, I'd like to start with you. The nationwide housing shortage is something that some states are experiencing more than others. We experience it to a particularly acute degree in the West and in my home state of Utah, where the federal government owns 2/3 of the land. And that severely restricts the housing supply. Now, there's a law in the books, like the Recreation and Public Purposes Act, that authorizes the Department of the Interior to lease or convey federal land for public purposes. Under the law, a public purpose is defined as, quote, for the purpose of providing facilities or services for the benefit of the public in connection with, but not limited to, public health, safety, or welfare. In your view, could housing be considered a public purpose for purpose of the Recreation and Public Purposes Act?
Sir, I think it could.
And in the event that it couldn't, recognizing that some might see it differently, or to address any ambiguity, I've introduced legislation called the Houses Act, which follows the template of the Recreation and Public Purposes Act to independently allow for that. Now, I was pleased to see recently that there was this announced partnership between the Department of Housing and Urban Development and the Department of the Interior to address housing affordability in the West. Any idea what actions the Department of Interior could take to help tackle the housing crisis?
Well, sir, I first want to say that we would love to work with you on that endeavor, and I know that for technical assistance, we offer it to every member of the committee when it comes to drafting legislative ideas that are creative. And I know housing has been a big issue, not just in the West, throughout our country. And I recall, working on this in the first Trump administration with particular attention to Park Service employees, because housing for Park Service employees tends to be one of the greatest obstacles to get that workforce out into these very rural or sometimes difficult or maybe more expensive areas so that we can have the workforce we need to keep our parks open. But when it comes to some of the opportunities there, I think, the RMPP Act has some issues with it. For instance, the reversionary clauses can be difficult and tie up potential home ownership with the full transference of land. I think when people think about owning a home, they believe it belongs to them and that the land is theirs, not that it could be pulled back by the federal government or by a township based upon not fulfilling the needs of the act in its original statutory form. So I think working on that, working on environmental reviews and efficiency will actually help make better use of that act.
Yeah, no, I think that's right, and it's one of the reasons why in the Houses Act we deal with that by leaving a short reversionary interest for a period of 15 years just to make sure that it remains in use as single-family housing during that duration. Once that 15-year period is elapsed, the reversionary interest goes away. Mr. Danley, let's turn to you for a moment. President Trump seeks to attack and limit the waste, fraud, and abuse occurring within the U.S. government. In any government spending, $7.2, $7.3 trillion a year, the crumbs that fall from that table are going to be pretty large, and it leaves room for people to make mistakes along the way. But some of those mistakes end up being very big and very costly. Recently, a number of projects, grants, and contracts that were mandated by law, such as the laws like the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act and the Inflation Reduction Act, have been exposed as problematic in one way or another, unnecessary, duplicative, or otherwise an issue. For example, the Department of Energy recently canceled a $247 million contract for appliance standards. If confirmed, how will you commit to working with Congress to make sure that DOE isn't frivolously spending taxpayer dollars or spending taxpayer dollars on unnecessary, duplicative, or wasteful projects?
Thank you, Senator Lee. Every government agency head and all of their subordinate officers are required to stop waste, fraud, and abuse wherever it's found. Every contract that the government signs and every set of funds that the government commits has to be done in accordance with the law, in accordance to the preconditions established by the agency's regulations, and the terms of the contract have to be honored. This is everything from the basic predicate requirements for the contract to the milestones and conditions. President Trump has outlined a very bold vision for reducing waste in federal government spending, and I am absolutely dedicated to the same purpose. It is the only way to properly steward the taxpayers' money, and government should constantly be on the lookout for ways to find greater efficiencies.
And strictly speaking, outside the context of its own branch, neither the legislative branch nor the judicial branch is typically a contracting agency. In other words, contracts may be entered into within the legislative branch for the legislative branch or within the judicial branch, likewise, for the judiciary. But typically for the government generally, contract decisions, overseeing the performance of a contract, entering into the contract, signing the contract, even in some circumstances anticipatorily repudiating a contract for reasons deemed necessary and appropriate by the executive. Those are executive decisions, not legislative or judicial ones typically. Is that right?
Of course it is. And not only does every branch have their own obligations, the executive branch spending, I don't know what the percentage is, but 99.99% of the money in contracts from the government has obviously a much weightier duty to ensure that those dollars are spent properly. And you know, there are efficiencies not just in the way that government conducts its business through contracting, but in the ways that the contracts are awarded and in the types of solicitations that the government undertakes. It is a fundamental problem, and there is a huge amount of money that's spent that doesn't need to be.
Thank you. Senator King, you're up next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. MacGregor, one of my principal concerns as the ranking member on, we call ourselves co-chairs with Steve Daines on the National Park Subcommittee, is staffing at the national parks. 10 or 15 years ago, well, let me just put it in perspective. In the last 15 years, staffing at the national parks has fallen by 15%, not counting the cuts that have been made in the last couple of months. Visitation at the national parks has gone up 15%. So we already had a staffing problem. So my request to you is stop cutting people at the national parks and start hiring them, because the parks are a gem of America. People visit them. They expect them to be maintained. They expect them to be open. They expect to be able to not have to wait in long lines in order to get into a park. So can you commit to me that we're going to stop cutting in the national parks and we're going to start to rebuild that very valuable staff?
Sir, so many members of this committee raised that issue because I think they, and we understand how important it is to keep those parks open, especially for tourism and economic dollars that are flowing into your communities. So I absolutely will commit to you on making sure that we work to have the appropriate staffing levels to keep those parks open and get as many people as possible into them.
Well, I would hope that the appropriate staffing levels be somewhat higher than they are today, given the fact that we already have a 30% gap in what's happened, forgetting about the recent cuts. So this is essential, and I think it would be a great disservice to the American people to compromise the availability of our national parks. Second thing on national parks is maintenance. As you and I discussed, the Great American Outdoors Act, I think, was one of the signaling achievements of the first Trump administration, which had a big piece of money for deferred maintenance. The problem is we're still deferring maintenance. And I fought all the way up to the Office of Management and Budget in the prior administration to try to get the maintenance budget increased. It's a false economy to not make repairs. They're only going to have to be done in the future, and they're going to cost more. We work with us and work with the Congress to increase the maintenance budget at the national parks. It's not very exciting, but it's something we have to do.
Sir, coming from the private sector, I understand the importance of O&M dollars on an annualized basis, but I will say this, it's interesting and there's a lot to dig in on the implementation of the Great American Outdoors Act. I find we talked about how, you know, we worked to advance this amazing legislation and now maintenance backlog has somehow gone up. We have a lot of work to do together on this, and I absolutely commit to working with you on it.
Well, one way to keep it from going up is to quit digging the hole. And that's what we're doing right now. Mr. Danley, I agree with you about permitting reform. I was one of the supporters of the bill here. I'm hoping we're going to be able to bring that bill back to life and perhaps improve it. I assume you agree that part of the permitting reform has to be transmission to permitting reform, because we're all talking about increasing electricity. The electricity has to get somewhere, and transmission is one of the real serious bottlenecks right now in sort of reinventing our electric system. Do you agree?
So to date, the real problems with federal permitting haven't been seen in transmission, because other than the backstop siting authority.
Are you serious about that? Because we've got transmission projects in the West that have been pending for 20 years.
So for the most part, other than when you have federal land crossings, which do of course occur in the West far more than they do in the East, but the places where we have the greatest sets of constraints, the highest congestion costs, are in the East more than the West. This is typically, obviously there are examples where that's not true. Those are most siting and permitting happens at the state level for transmission. There's only, for transmission lines generally, there's the backstop siting authority that was reenacted again.
Right.
But of course, transmission has to be part of the solution, or part of the discussion, because as the demand grows and we have to have a more robust transmission system, both to meet NERC reliability standards and simply get real power to its destination, we're going to have to increase transmission lines all over the country.
And that's got to be part of the solution. Quickly, research. You talked about research. One of the things that disturbs me that's going on now in the administration is cutting research money all over the place. Department of Health and Human Services, even research on Alzheimer's, which I absolutely don't understand. The Department of Energy is one of the leading research parts of our government, and I think you mentioned basic research being important that's not immediately commercially valuable, so it's not going to be done in the private sector. Fracking was invented under Department of Energy research grants back in the 80s. Do you agree that we've got to maintain the research budget, not only at the national labs, but at places like NREL and the other work that the Department of Energy is doing in research on energy development generally?
Yes, the Congress has charged the Department of Energy with conducting this research. As I mentioned in my opening statement, the number of advances we've had has changed America's commercial outlook and has created new industries. And the money spent on basic research, the national labs found quarks. These are things that are not commercially viable on their own, but have improved the science of the world.
I myself wouldn't know a quark if I fell over one, but I understand.
Nevertheless, they are important. And
Sure.
I absolutely agree with you that this research is important and is central to the function of the Department of Energy.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I hope we can have a second round because I have a few more questions.
Senator Hyde-Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I certainly welcome you both here. Excited that you're back, very excited about your nominations, and I want to associate myself with the remarks of Senator Justice. I think you're going to do a fantastic job, but thank you for your willingness to do this. And I want to start with Ms. MacGregor. Sure enjoyed our visit, and we talked about the Vicksburg National Military Park in Mississippi and then the Natchez historical park sites that are in Natchez, Mississippi, and I certainly would love your commitment on helping me reach our goals there. We're looking at several things, a visitor center, but it's Mississippi's #1 tourist destination is the military park, and we're very, very proud of that. One of the other things is the offshore oil and gas exploration and production in the Gulf of America. It's crucial to both the President's energy agenda and to the economies of the Gulf states. Revenue from lease sales support our states and fund mandatory programs such as the Land, Water, and Conservation Fund, and mandatory lease sales in the Gulf would further boost this revenue. And I support Senator Cassidy's bill to mandate 2 offshore oil and gas lease sales per year for the next 10 years, and look forward to working with him and this committee to advance that legislation. And where I am from, so many of our residents there have employment there. We know what fossil fuels do, and they have really, really been in dire need in the last few years. But do you consider continued offshore oil and gas development visits vital to our nation's security and economy? And will you support our efforts to mandate lease sales, especially if the department works on the new 5-year leasing plan?
Senator, thank you for the question, and I truly enjoyed, I love our visits together. Absolutely, I can commit to you with working on that legislation. I know that the Gulf of America has been one of the largest energy-producing provinces in our country for decades, and the innovations that come out of that offshore province have been exported throughout the world. But ultimately, that was created and innovated here in the United States, and I'd like to see that province produce long into the future. As the statute requires, we need to make those resources available for national need. And I think the American people would like to see their prices come down in energy. So I absolutely will work with you and the senators on various solutions for that.
And the invitation certainly stands open for the military park.
Taken.
I'd love to host you there.
Thank you.
Mr. Danley, thank you for being here. I cannot tell you how excited we are that you're willing to do this and look so forward to working with you. As we know, reliable, affordable energy and a resilient grid is critical for continued economic growth, especially in companies that make investment and expansion decisions based on access to inexpensive, reliable energy. As demand grows, so does the need for more baseload power, And I believe nuclear energy continues to be at the forefront of the conversation, providing more safe, clean, reliable power to meet those growing demands. And we're very excited about this, and we're looking forward to some growth. What steps do you see the Department of Energy taking to advance nuclear, including new technologies such as small modular nuclear reactors?
Thank you for the question, Senator. In fact, in most of my discussions with the members of the committee, the subject of advancing nuclear energy has been very common in all the talks that I've had. Probably the most important thing that the Department of Energy can do, and in fact has done, right? The first civilian nuclear power demonstrations were done in a national lab, where the Department of Energy started the entire process of creating civilian nuclear power, is to continue the work that's being done in Idaho National Lab to prove and have demonstration cases for SMRs and next generation nuclear power. There are any number of regulatory and commercial hurdles to commercialization of nuclear, all of which I would love to see either overcome or changed. I don't see a way that we can meet the demand that we're facing without having nuclear power as part of the solution. Right now, it makes about 20% of the total generation in the United States. But if we increase our installed load at the rate that I think we're going to have to build more nuclear to provide that baseload generation. And so the Department of Energy is going to be key to that.
Thank you, and I am out of time.
Senator Gallego.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I feel like I'm going to sound like a broken record because when you're this low on the dais, everyone takes all the great questions. But number one, to echo Senator King's comments on staffing at our national parks, and I spoke earlier with you about this. Arizona, we are entirely dependent, especially our northern Arizona region. The economy is entirely dependent on our national parks and tourism, so we want to make sure that there is some good thought and forethought before we have more layoffs and if possible, to bring back these workers, because it actually aren't that many in Arizona to begin with, but the fact is they produce billions and billions of jobs because they get such a great experience visiting our, I think you said, did you say gems or gyms as I was walking? Jams? GEM, okay, sorry. English is my second language, so sometimes things will hit. And then just moving on, further conversations on SMR and nuclear power. When I was meeting with Secretary Wright during his nomination, we talked about the need for more nuclear energy deployment, especially in Arizona. We have a three-pronged problem, which is a good problem. People want to move to Arizona because it's a great state. They have, great weather, great representation, in my opinion. But we also have a great economy, which is some high-skilled, high-energy economy, whether it's chips or the ancillary businesses that feed into chips. And we have data warehouses that are moving into Arizona because, Arizona, for a lot of its problems that we do have when it comes to forest fires, likelihood of us having any type of massive emergency that's going to, destroy these data warehouses that are worth billions of dollars are slim to none. So what does that mean? We have an energy problem coming up in Arizona. 30% of our energy portfolio is nuclear. I would like to see it to grow. And so I want to make sure that we can do anything we can to do that, including fixing regulatory burdens and hurdles or anything else. I'd love to make sure that we have an ability to work with that in a bipartisan manner because, the country that I think can deploy quicker and faster nuclear energy is going to be the country that's going to be able to really own the next 100 years. And AI is really important, but AI only matters if you actually can energize it and actually create it and move that energy. So since everyone took my questions, and I'll go into something more deeper with Ms. MacGregor here, in terms of drought in Arizona, especially with Glen Canyon, something that I think you worked on when you were on the House Natural Resources Committee with me. In the last 4 years, we have learned from reclamation that Glen Canyon Dam has design flaws that limit its ability to pass water at low elevations, which is really bad when we have drought. So we need to fix this dam as soon as possible. And we need the ability to pass water around the dam if hydrology gets worse, so if we just don't have enough snowmelt. I raised this issue with Secretary Burgum in his hearing, but I'd like to just ask you too, will you make fixing this dam that delivers water to approximately 30 million people in the lower basin a priority?
Senator, I know that we had a great conversation about drought in the West and how that impacts water users in your state, especially for hydropower too, I believe. And I think I am curious about some of the decisions of the last administration, and I know that was an alternative, I think, that was scoped in one of their initial reviews of alternatives. So I will absolutely commit to working with you on that and other issues related to drought in the West.
And just kind of in general, back hitting on the drought questions, is Arizona, where, whiskey is for drinking, water is for fighting. The Colorado River supports a total of $1.4 trillion economy, and then it's a primary water source for now 40 million people across the 7 western states. It also, of course, supports 5.5 million acres of agriculture, tribes, 11 national parks. Since 2001, the Colorado River community has been grappling with risk and uncertainty in available water supplies at increasing intensity. So could you please just share your thoughts on the key priorities that DOI will use to avoid the need for crisis-to-crisis management and provide greater predictability and available water supplies for our communities?
Absolutely. I know that the law of the river is incredibly important to so many. I think it's the 7 basin states. They are almost all represented on this committee, and I know there are a lot of opinions reaching across all those states and needs, and not just the states, but tribes and, as you said, the 40 million people who depend on that getting it right. My hope is ultimately that is what and remains and has been successful in the past as a state-brokered solution. And Interior will be playing a role in that. And I think that's one of the important issues facing the Water and Science hallway at the department.
Thank you. I yield back.
Senator Cassidy, you're up next.
Okay. Thank you both, because I had a chance to meet with you both, and some of these questions seem like what we've talked about. I just want it for the public record, if you will. Ms. MacGregor, last week, the Department of Interior's Office of Natural Resources Revenue announced its 2024 disbursements to the 4 states along the Gulf of America. As expected, the revenues from oil and gas development from GOMESA far exceeded the $375 million cap. Now, if the cap were higher, there'd be dollars there to help rebuild coastline to protect communities from hurricanes like Katrina or from, which hit both of our states, Ida, Harvey, et cetera. Because we know that when you build out your wetlands, that you absorb the impact from the hurricane, which means that your settled areas have less damage. We use that money in our state for flood protection and for coastal restoration by state constitutional mandate. So that said, I have a bill, the RISE Act, which would lift the cap on state funds under GOMESA, ensuring that states hosting energy development directly benefit from those activities. Given your experience as Deputy Secretary of the Interior, how important is an effective model for revenue sharing?
Thank you, Senator, for the question. And I think with you hailing from Louisiana and now me from Florida hurricanes, I have a renewed appreciation for their devastation. And when it comes to revenue sharing, I absolutely agree with you. It is the law now. It's in GOMESA. We are required to faithfully execute on GOMESA when it comes to revenue sharing. And as many of the senators here on this dais also know, that those dollars are also dedicated to the Land and Water Conservation Fund that has impacts in everyone's district. So I look forward to working with you on that, and I understand that it's important to all 4 Gulf states.
And so, to that degree, how would you envision working with the Secretary to leverage offshore energy in the Gulf of Mexico, excuse me, I'm sorry, I can't help it, to support energy dominance?
So for leveraging greater offshore oil and gas in the Gulf of America, we have a lot to work on, and I think it's important that senators understand we will obey the law. We will follow the contours of the Outer Continental Shelf Lands Act as required. But I do think the American people would like to see more than just 2 to 3 lease sales. Historically, in the past, we've had really quite a few prodigious lease sales, and not just in the Gulf of America and Alaska and beyond. So I know the resources are concentrated a lot on the Gulf of America and up in Alaska, and we look forward to working with everyone on measures that will further embrace offshore energy.
Mr. Danley, Louisiana is currently home to more than 60% of the current LNG exports. and a large number of LNG projects are on the pipeline, excuse the pun, awaiting permitting approval. And I appreciate what President Trump, Secretary Wright, and the Department of Energy have done to help unleash this LNG bonanza, if you will. How can DOE, or what can DOE do to further eliminate barriers through LNG exporting, including through improved permitting?
Thank you for the question, Senator. It should probably come as no surprise that I care a lot about LNG exports. I've worked on the subject from the Commission side for years. The most important thing is to return to the statutory standard in Section 3 of the Natural Gas Act, which has the inverted presumption for the granting of permits to non-free trade agreement countries, where you have to demonstrate affirmatively that the export is not consistent with the public interest, which is a analytical rubric that requires the examination of a handful of different elements in the application, but return to that standard, which had been the standard invariably for decades beforehand.
Let me ask you as well. In Baton Rouge last Friday, LSU and the Idaho National Laboratory signed an MOU to accelerate technology and talent development in Louisiana to benefit the rest of the nation. This is the first formal partnership between a national lab and a Louisiana university. So I'm just going to ask, how can you ensure that DOE labs prioritize research supporting my state's energy and manufacturing sectors?
So I am not at the DOE, and I don't know the details of all of these partnerships between universities and the labs, but I am happy to talk to you as much as you want, should I be confirmed, to ensure we have as much cooperation between the institutions as we can get.
That'll be good, because if you will, we have the ecosystem that is developing the technology for not only our nation, but for the rest of the world. And obviously, I'd like my Louisiana talent to be able to benefit in that development being supported by the DOE.
I think it's fundamental to the DOE's objectives with the national labs and its research mission to get as much talent as we can from wherever it's possible. We want the absolute best scientists and engineers working on the hardest problems.
Sounds great. Thank you. I yield.
Senator Cortez Masto. No, I'm sorry. Senator Hirono, I apologize.
Welcome to both of you. As part of my responsibility to ensure the fitness of all nominees who come before any of my committees, I ask the following two initial questions, and we will start with Ms. MacGregor. Since you became a legal adult, have you ever made unwanted requests for sexual favors or committed any verbal or physical harassment or assault of a sexual nature?
I have not.
MacGregor.
No.
Have you ever faced discipline or entered into a settlement related to this kind of conduct?
I'm sorry, have
you ever faced discipline or entered into a settlement related to this kind of conduct?
I have not.
No.
For Ms. MacGregor, on DOJ's list of federal lease terminations, on that list is the Ironworks building in Hilo, Hawaii. This building currently houses U.S. Geological Survey employees that work for the Hawaiian Volcano Observatory, which was destroyed during the 2018 Kilauea eruption. And this building provides temporary office and storage space while the permanent Hawaiian Volcano Observatory is built on the campus of University of Hawaii Hilo, planned for completion in 2 years. This move to terminate the lease with no clear plan on where these employees will work or store their equipment in the interim makes me question this administration's regard for the important role the volcano observatories play in keeping our communities safe and informed. Do you believe that the USGS Volcano Hazards Program is important? And if so, what will you do as Deputy Secretary to ensure that USGS employees in Hilo are able to carry out their critical life-saving work?
Senator, thank you for that important question. And I want you to know that in the first Trump administration, I spent quite a bit of time with the USGS hazards team, especially on some of the seismic systems installed up in the Pacific Northwest related to earthquake early warning systems. I know how important they are to communities, and while I'm not in the building, I haven't seen a list of cancellations. I'll absolutely work with you on your needs and for those of the people of Hawaii.
Okay, that sounds as though you consider their work to be very critical and that they obviously need a place to work from and store the things that they need. So we will work to make sure that that happens.
Yes, I
Should
will
you be
work with
confirmed,
you,
of course.
especially on a lot of the hazard
you.
systems, yep.
Thank you. Also for you, in your 2019 testimony before this committee, you noted that your introduction to the department's mission was through visiting Valley Forge National Park, and that visiting national parks drove your passion for American history and your understanding for the importance of preserving these special places. Similarly, during Secretary Burgeth's nomination hearing earlier this year, he asserted that, and I quote, "We have to protect every single inch of our national parks." There are currently hundreds of mining claims within and thousands more near national park boundaries, threatening the preservation of these special places. A couple of weeks ago, President Trump issued an executive order directing Secretary Burgum to prioritize mineral production and mining-related purposes as a primary use of federal land with mineral deposits. My question to you is, how would allowing companies to mine in or near national parks preserve every single inch of our national parks?
Well, Senator, I'm unfamiliar of any situation where there's mining directly in a national park. Can you give me an example that you're referring to that I can take a look at?
Well, there are hundreds of mining claims, and if the president says that these are the claims that can be acted upon, you are going to be directed to let them do so, I suppose. That's the question.
I think when I hear...
How does that comport with the Secretary's desire to protect every single inch of
It
our
sounds like we
national
might have
parks?
a little bit of a misunderstanding of, when I hear public lands, I think multiple use and public sustained yield under FLPMA lands, multiple use lands managed by the BLM, not by the National Park Service. And my understanding of the protections under the Organic Act and the establishment of these national parks, their maintenance and their continued
So you would say,
management.
excuse me, my time is pretty much up, but you would say that allowing mining in our national parks would be probably incompatible to the desire to save. I mean, you would want to save these treasures as a priority.
Senator, I'm not familiar of any national park, and I could be completely wrong, but any national park where there is mining inside the boundaries of the park.
No, the president wants you to go there. Okay, we obviously are going to need to see what happens, because he wants these federal lands to be used for extraction purposes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Hirono. Senator Murkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome, both of you. Ms. MacGregor, I enjoyed our conversation. I'm looking forward to you being back to fix a lot of things. Many of the issues that we spoke about in my office related to federal lands, better consultation with Alaska Natives, extending as well to restoring what we do with our multiple use lands, natural fires, natural hazards like wildfires, producing more of our energy, a lot to do. And Mr. Danley, you have been before this committee multiple times as well. I'm looking forward with working with you to help address some of Alaska's energy challenges, everything from microgrids to geothermal to advanced nuclear. And I want to follow on the comment that was made by the senator from Arizona. I just came from a critical minerals discussion this morning. And as I look to our opportunity to be able to access these great resources that we need until we figure out how to deal with power in some of these remote areas, it's going to be really hard to do. And I look at small modular reactors, the advancements that can come from here as being a real opportunity. I want to address a couple questions to both of you. Hopefully, they should be very quick and easy. I know that you are not in the building yet. I get that, but we have all watched as we have seen this effort to reduce the size of governments, and certainly within the Department of Energy and the Department of Interior. I have been concerned and have expressed how many of these employees have been treated in this process. I would ask that you both commit, if you are confirmed, that you will abide by the statutory requirements to notify Congress of any plans to reorganize, restructure, or implement reductions in force. I'm also the chairman on the Interior Appropriations Committee that has oversight here. We have sent letters to the secretaries themselves with regards to the requirement in law about advance notification. And then just from my perspective as a senator who represents a state that has a lot of public lands and a big federal presence, we have a lot of engagement and interaction with you. So I would just ask, again, if I can have your commitment that you'll be transparent with us about what is coming and to abide by the statutory requirements to notify.
Senator, I can commit to obey all federal laws when it comes to any of the efficiency efforts that we're working on.
Great, thank you.
I also commit to following the law for all of the efficiency efforts.
Thank you. I have had an opportunity to talk not only to you, Ms. MacGregor, but certainly my colleagues here on the committee know that we're facing a situation in Alaska with declining production in Cook Inlet with regards to our natural gas, and facing what I think is really an unforgivable direction, and that would be the prospect of LNG imports and potentially from Canada. So I would ask both of you to partner with me, with the delegation, to advance the Alaska projects and to support development of our resources so we can avoid the reliance on energy imports. For a state that has as much as the state of Alaska has, there is no good reason that we should be relying on Canada to keep our lights on. So do I have that commitment from the both of you?
You sure do, and I was just as shocked when you informed me of that, and I look forward to working with you on those issues.
Great, thank you. Mr. Danley.
It's crazy to think that Alaska would be importing energy.
It is crazy.
I absolutely commit to working on that with you.
Yeah, you both know we have an awful lot to offer there. Ms. MacGregor, I want to take you back to some of our greatest hits from when you were in the first Trump administration. Some of the alphabet issues that you worked on, ITRs, PLOs. We have got to be making progress with that. Certainly, the President's executive order is going to help us there. But I also raised with you the issue of BIA probate and the extraordinary backlog that we're dealing with. It should not take 5 or 10 or more years to resolve these probate cases. And I would just ask that you put a priority on these issues so that we can deal with something that is not only impacted us greatly in Alaska, but I think in so many other parts of the country as well.
I'm so grateful that you raised that issue. I had never even heard of it before, but the first thing I thought is if it's impacting you and the people of Alaska, it must be impacting so many more on this committee and other parts of the state. So I look forward to working with you on that.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you,
Time's
Senator.
expired.
Senator Hickenlooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks both of you for your past public service and your willingness to go back into the maelstrom. I'll start with you, Ms. MacGregor, and thank you for the time to come and visit. You know, the staffing cuts there were the major cuts, and then people were put back. But even though they've been reinstated, there's another plan out that you know, a quarter of all DOI employees are on the chopping block. And I think the volatility certainly has staff that I know in Colorado and people that have reached out unnerved. And there's a level of anxiety there. And obviously the decisions that get made that I think you will have a voice in, I hope you'll have a voice in, on staffing, it will have consequences, have reverberations in terms of how we use those lands in terms of conservation and recreation, not to mention energy production or critical minerals. What are your plans, or how do you look at trying to ensure that the staff, have that spirit, which the good culture that any group needs to perform at a high level, and while they're working to protect some of our most valuable resources?
Well, thank you, Senator, and thank you for meeting with me. I had a great meeting with you about talking about Pennsylvania. It was nice. When I review a lot of this, I've been watching just like you all have with media reports. I'm not in the building, as we've talked about already, but I think there's a lot of questions I have, but I also think there's a lot of spin, and that tends to happen in these sort of instances. Ultimately, I support the president's efforts to achieve efficiency in the federal government. I think the endeavor to achieve efficiency should be applauded. But I also agree with you that to achieve efficiency, you have to have talent to move permits. You have to have the talent, and you have to have an inspired workforce to be able to do the work. So I fully understand that that's part of the job going in the building, and I look forward to working with a lot of the same excellent career employees that I worked with the first time around, and working to get moving on a lot of the actions we need to take at the department.
Yeah, well, again, I'm no stranger to trying to make government more efficient. And as mayor and as governor, we did a hiring freeze for, I think, 2.5 years when I was mayor as a way of diminishing the workforce, but we found ways to use efficiencies to actually deliver more services to people at a lower cost. But I spent a quarter of my time in the agencies talking to the workforce and making sure that they were fired up and knew how valuable they were. I don't see that happening right now, and I find it very concerning. And Mr. Danley, the same question to you, similar circumstances, I suspect.
I'm not at the Department of Energy, so of course I don't know the details of anything that's going on there. I've read the same press accounts that everybody else has. I'm no stranger to dealing with the personnel end of administrative agencies. I was the chairman of FERC, and I dealt with personnel there, and I plan to do what I've always done before when my advice is sought, which is seek the input of the Employment Council and the Ethics Council at the department whenever making decisions regarding employment.
All right, got it. And I wanted to also talk to you a little bit about this effort to gain energy dominance. But a lot of the clawbacks that are being discussed there were funds that were originally appropriated to support projects to build advanced energy technologies and make investments to try and get electricity more reliable, more affordable. The last numbers we saw was that the DOE may rescind up to $104 million of Colorado-based awards alone. That's a rumor. I don't think there's. Let's throw that number out and let's throw that number away. But there's probably going to be a large number because there is a real push to try and find these savings. In many cases, these funds were already appropriated through Congress, and they were for things like grid efficiency or grid reliability, some other form of advanced technology. Are you willing to commit that you'll obey the law and make sure that we don't rescind funds that have been appropriated legally for these, I think in many cases, really important energy projects?
So again, just like I said before, I've seen the same press accounts everybody else has. Actual rescissions, as far as I know, haven't occurred yet.
Right.
And I don't know what the plans are, if there are in fact plans. I absolutely commit to following the law. This has been the focal point of my entire career so far, is doing honor to the statute. And I will follow the law in discharging the duties of the department.
All right, well, I appreciate that. Thank both of you. I think both of you are crucial positions. You're going to have a lot to do with what happens in the next couple of years, and we appreciate your service.
Thank you, Senator Hickenlooper. Senator Daines.
Chairman, thank you. I'm going to jump right in. Ms. MacGregor, in Montana, we're facing serious hurdles to implementing forest management projects due to litigation. Our forests no longer have loggers in them. They're crawling with lawyers. that's a problem. The situation was exacerbated in 2015 when the Ninth Circuit issued that Cottonwood decision. Today, as I speak, we have 300 million board feet of timber tied up in litigation in Montana. Region 1, over 500 million board feet tied up because of litigation. That Cottonwood decision creates a cyclical procedural requirement to consult under the Endangered Species Act after a new species is listed, new critical habitat is designated, or, quote, new information is found. We just need to get the Ninth Circuit Court to be congruent with the other circuits, and that's essentially what the Cottonwood fix does. It has passed this committee and with strong bipartisan support, so we're ready to act on it yet again. We're going to need help getting across the finish line, certainly not on the President's desk. We've seen hundreds of projects across states in the Ninth Circuit, that are delayed because we've got the Forest Service and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service attempting to meet this ambiguous standard with no on-the-ground impact. We've got this legislation, again, strong bipartisan support. So my question, would you commit to working with me, working with Congress, to ensure that a permanent solution is found, either through administrative action or through this legislative fix?
Senator, thank you for that important question, and it's probably no laughing matter. Forest management, I know, is life or death in a lot of your states. We absolutely commit, and I personally commit to working with you on that, and I know that getting, like I said in my opening statement, certainty so that these actions can continue is incredibly important, and I should say I was very inspired by all of you in the efforts you all led to amend NEPA for the first time in 50 years in the Fiscal Responsibility Act. And I know when you come together, this body can do amazing things that help us implement our laws in a more efficient way.
Thank you. There's just so many wins if we can get this problem fixed in terms of improved wildlife habitat, improved economic benefits, overall improved trout habitat in terms of streams that get hammered with the silting from major disastrous wildfires. So lots of benefits, not to mention we literally have had football games on Friday nights in Montana canceled because of air quality. This is not the smog of LA. This is smoke coming from these wildfires, so it's a health risk as well. And then we, of course, have the tragic examples of firefighters losing their lives trying to fight these very hot and robust fires. Mr. Danley, a question for you. With your experience at FERC, you have firsthand knowledge of our energy and transmission needs. Our energy demand is only projected to grow, as we talked yesterday. And to meet this demand, we must expand our energy production, not replace it. With rising demand, and I will tell you every time I meet with a tech CEO today, the conversation is not about the constraint of the workforce. The constraint is energy, as we want to move forward here with a significant increase in data centers and so forth to meet the demands of AI and quantum computing. With rising demands, we also need to ensure we can maintain our grid stability. And the key to grid stability is going to be more baseload power. Doing this will ensure we have access to affordable, reliable power 24/7 and year-round. And as we talked yesterday, our transmission systems are crucial to deliver this power. But we need to expand our systems if we're going to bring new projects onto the grid. In Montana, the Department of Energy is involved in numerous energy and transmission projects that will help enhance our energy dominance and support our energy needs. My question, Mr. Danley, is how do you envision the Department of Energy strengthening partnerships with our states, with our communities, with energy companies to expand energy production, to expand transmission across the United States?
So thank you for the question, Senator. I appreciated the conversation we had in your office yesterday. The Department of Energy has innumerable different programs that are designed to either promote the commercialization of or help with the improvement of the pre-existing facilities that are fundamental to keeping the transmission system working or developing new generation. And the president and the secretary have both shown extreme enthusiasm for the idea of getting as much new generation online and interconnected as possible. And the department is going to use every one of the tools at its disposal to ensure that we have as much generation available and as resilient a bulk power system as we can get. And you are correct that the constraining factor for all of the tech companies right now is power. Not just the amount of delivered real power, but also the interconnection sites that are available to actually connect the facilities to the bulk power system, and the availability of power that's on a reliable basis. It can be very challenging in constrained areas to achieve both of those. And we will not be able to meet the commercial demands of our companies if we don't ensure that there is more power available.
Thanks, Mr. Danley. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Senator Daines. Senator Cortez Masto. I'm sorry, Senator Cortez Masto, yes.
Thank you. Mr. Danley, during your FERC nomination hearing before this committee in November of 2019, I asked you then if you agreed that renewable energy should continue to play an important role in our nation's energy mix. And you replied, undoubtedly. Then in response to my follow-up question, you agreed that renewables like wind and solar power can be reliably integrated into the power grid. Do you still agree with that today?
Thank you for the question, Senator, and I remember that confirmation hearing like it was yesterday. Yes, they can be integrated. There are challenges to integration. It's not the same type of generation that the bulk power system was built on from its infancy. And when you reach a certain threshold, those challenges become multiplicative. And so there are thresholds that can be reached where it becomes more difficult. But yes, the idea that in a time of demand like we're facing now, that we would turn away any megawatts that are available seems irrational to me. But there are engineering problems that attend to the use of intermittence.
In response to another follow-up question, you agreed that states hold the authority under the Federal Power Act to establish the resource mix that best serves their customers. Do you still hold that position?
The state, the law hasn't changed, and neither has my opinion. The states are granted the authority to determine what generation is within their borders.
Thank you. And then this is a question for both of you. As you've heard from some of my colleagues, we've been concerned by what you might be walking into in your respective departments. We're seeing decisions by the current administration, from tariffs to firings to restructurings that are undercutting our national and local economies, including in emerging and critical industries like outdoor recreation, travel, and tourism. The chaotic executive orders and actions often have to be walked back or reversed, such as, and we've heard a little bit about this, the firing of federal firefighters, or in my state, nuclear safety officials within DOE's National Nuclear Security Administration. So my question to both of you, and I'll start with you, Mr. Danley, is if confirmed, will you commit to transparency on future actions taken by you and your departments and prioritize substantive responses to overdue questions that me and my colleagues have requested in letters?
So this committee has seen my correspondence and my response to your letters before when I was a commissioner. I didn't give you the pro forma one-pagers. I had these 90-page missives that completely laid bare everything at the commission. I have no problem telling this committee or any member of Congress anything they want to know about what we do.
Great. That's a yes. I appreciate that. Ms. MacGregor.
Senator, I also agree with you that sunshine is always important for this committee and also for the American people to understand how their government's working, so we will work with you.
Thank you. Ms. MacGregor, much of the West has been experiencing a historic drought, and I think one of my colleagues may have asked this question of you already, but let me further elaborate. Nevada is one of the several basin states that relies on water from the Colorado River. We are currently engaged in negotiations to set the guidelines for future water allocations because we also know that the current guidelines expire in 2027, and we need to start now, and we have started even before now. But the new operations have to be in place before the end of 2026 to avoid confusion and conflict for the entire southwestern United States. Despite 20 years of collaboration, the upper and lower basin have not yet reached an agreement. The Department of Interior must be a leader to bring the 7 basin states together on these alternatives and develop the post-2026 guidelines. As Deputy Secretary, how will you prioritize this process to ensure the basin can reach a consensus, avoid litigation before time runs out with the necessary guidelines that we have to pass?
Senator, thank you for that question, and I think I was able to enjoy several meetings with many senators on this dais about this particular issue, and I know that avoiding litigation on this incredibly important basin is absolutely a must. And it's going to be a priority of the department to work together with the 7 basin states, tribes, water users, hydropower generators, everyone, the 40 million people who rely on a smart solution that must be state-led.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to that. We need that involvement. And if you don't know, the senators on the basin states, we all work very well together on this particular issue, and we're looking for that involvement from the Department of Interior as well. So thank you.
Senator Padilla.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Echoing Senator Cortez Masto's comments on the entire basin states working so well together, because you know how critical that is. And we had that conversation in my office just yesterday. But Ms. MacGregor, definitely appreciate the opportunity to go through some of my priorities with you when we met previously. And I hope you took away from our meeting the constant theme of collaboration on so many of these intricate and complex issues, including but not limited to the recently established national monuments in California. As I mentioned, these protected landscapes we crafted very intentionally to ensure that there is no energy potential that's being compromised as a result of the designation of the Chuckwalla and Tutitla National Monument. And I think you have that confirmation through the endorsements of these monuments by energy utilities, energy developers. I raised the same background with Secretary Burgum, both in our conversations and in writing. The department's review that's been called for of public lands must include meeting with the stakeholders that were involved. Stakeholders that include the congressional delegation, the governor of California, the state's energy agencies, local officials, and notably the tribal leaders who actually spearheaded the movement and the creation of these monuments. And so it took me a little bit by surprise when last month the administration issued, but then rescinded, a fact sheet that suggested that the White House terminated the recently designated national monuments, all despite the fact that the president, in my opinion, doesn't have the legal authority to undo a monument under the Antiquities Act. Not sure if you were involved at all with the crafting of the executive order and or the fact sheet, but I guess my first question would be, are you aware of the broad bipartisan, local, and tribal support for the Chuckwalla and Tutitla National Monuments?
Sir, I've closely watched that monument establishment.
So is that a yes?
Yes.
Okay, so they want to get you on the record recognizing the broad-based support for the creation of these monuments. Now, more broadly, as a matter of policy, do you believe that local communities and tribal leaders should have a say in the management of their public lands?
I think local involvement is something that everyone on this dais agrees with.
Okay. Well, I'm talking just about you, not the folks on the dais. You're the nominee before us.
Local involvement is embedded in almost all of the organic acts at the department, so yes.
Good faith consultation and engagement is what we're looking for. Now, as the department did under the first Trump administration, will you commit to releasing any rollbacks that you may be considering for public comment prior to taking action, if you're confirmed?
Senator, it's hard for me to commit on a completely hypothetical question related to the Antiquities Act, especially given that the Antiquities Act of 1906 has the designation of monuments purely within the ambit of the President of the United States. But I do know that that monument and many monuments are important to you in the state of California, and I will absolutely work with you. But I have not yet seen any direction from the president yet. I am familiar with that of the past, but I haven't seen any yet unless I've missed something related to review of our national monuments.
Okay, I wasn't trying to debate or the Antiquities Act, just referencing what seemed to be the policy in the first Trump administration of sharing publicly before an actual effort to roll back, and I would hope that continues in this second administration. Question, my time remaining for Mr. Danley. California proudly was the first state in the nation to launch a hydrogen hub. We refer to it as ARCHES, which will facilitate a network of hydrogen production sites to catalyze the use of hydrogen throughout California and frankly jumpstart the hydrogen economy, not just in California, but across the country. The California hub enjoys bipartisan support from our California delegation. However, last week, the Department of Energy, quote-unquote, cut list reportedly included ARCHES and other hydrogen hubs to be cut. So I want to point out that ARCHES, again, is not just critical to California, but critical to our national economy. If confirmed, would you commit to working with California to ensure that funding is not arbitrarily taken away?
Thank you for the question, Senator. And I've had a series of inquiries like this along the way. Of course, I'm not in the building and I don't know what is being contemplated, but I'm obviously happy to work with any member of the committee on any of the subjects that the DOE is working on in their state.
And should you be confirmed, would you be willing to commit to meet with the ARCHES staff before any final decision on cuts are made?
Again, I'm not certain what, should I be confirmed what my schedule is going to be like or what the normal fora are for engagement? I don't know what
with
the
leadership
rules
of the
are.
hub that may be on the chopping block, but one of the most important hubs in America.
I certainly would have no objection to doing so. I just, it's a little premature to start filling calendars for a position I've not yet been.
I'm not looking at dates and times, it's your commitment to willingness to.
I am perfectly happy to work on any of the projects that the DOE is working on.
Okay, we'll be following up. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Senator Hoeven.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome to both of you. Appreciate you stopping by and visiting with me, and look forward to very much to working with you. Starting with you, Ms. MacGregor, we've got some legislative priorities, and I'd like your help on them. So I'm going to ask on the record here if you will help us. We're working on the North Dakota Trust Lands Completion Act, which would allow tribes in our state to swap land with the state to the benefit of the tribes and to the benefit of the state. Involves tribal-owned land and state-owned land. That's one. The other is the Theodore Roosevelt Presidential Library. You might have heard about it. Perhaps Secretary Burgum mentioned it to you because he's really worked on it hard. It's a great project. We've worked on it hard, and we've passed legislation here through this committee and across and through the Congress to make it happen. But there's more to do. And then also the Dakota Water Resources Act, which actually Senator Padilla co-sponsored with me. But those three are legislative priorities, and I'd ask for your help with them. Are you willing to help?
Absolutely, sir.
Thank you. The next is the Biden administration implemented on BLM lands, what they call a BLM public lands rule. Essentially, it closes off about half of the BLM lands in our state, and we have a lot of them, to oil and gas, and closes out almost all of them for federal coal. And I'd ask that you work with us to roll back that harmful policy.
I am familiar with that rule, sir, and I'd be happy to work with you ongoing on that matter.
Thank you. Are you committed to multiple use on federal lands? It is the law, by the way.
It's the law, sir, so yes.
Good, good. And then in a lot of cases, we have split estates on mineral interests between the federal government and maybe the state, private individuals. Don't you think it's important that we get timely response from federal government so as to not disenfranchise individual private property rights or the states?
Absolutely, sir. That was in my opening statement. I think timeliness is incredibly important.
And the same on NEPA reviews?
Yes, sir. That's also the law.
And then are you pro-horse or anti-horse?
It depends on the horse.
Good answer. As somebody who was raised with horses, she knows her stuff. In this case, I'm looking for a pro-horse answer, though, because we are working on legislation to protect the horses in Theodore Roosevelt National Park, and would welcome and appreciate your assistance with it if you're so inclined.
I have some ideas for you.
Great.
Some horses.
Yeah, yeah. But you are willing to work with us on it? Okay, thank you. Mr. Danley, we need more baseload for the stability of the grid. And I mean, I think you coming into this position to work with Secretary Wright is really outstanding, given your not only legal background and all that, but your work on the FERC. I mean, I think that's just a great background for this position, and so welcome that. We need more baseload on the grid. I want you to talk about that, and then I also want you to talk about how we get, you know, carbon capture technologies to economic viability. We have technological viability, as our chair knows, or current acting chair, I guess. He's actually our whip, but I see they're letting him chair the committee today, so. How do we get more baseload? How do we get to economic viability for carbon capture technologies?
So this has been, the subject of needing more baseload power for the stability of the bulk electric system is a subject that I've talked about multiple times, including in colloquies with you in front of this committee when I was at FERC. And that still remains true. The baseload needs now, though, are not merely for the services that are required to keep the system stable, spinning mass and the like, but at this point we need more baseload power simply because we're having increasing demand for real power delivered. And so it's now has the dual purpose of we need baseload to shore up the stability of the bulk power system, and we actually just need to deliver more power reliably.
Right, and so for like Maine and New Mexico, places like that, we need baseload so they don't have problems getting their power, right? It's really important for our good friends there.
So the Federal Power Act is a national act that tries to make sure that everybody can have access to power across state borders, and yes, baseload power anywhere in an interconnection is good for everybody in the interconnection. How to get more of it? We have problems with the development of transmission, which was a subject that had come up before. But there's also the problem, at least in the areas that are regulated by FERC jurisdictional markets, baseload power has historically been undervalued, and we see this in retirements of assets that still have useful life in them. We see the scarcity in the pricing in the most recent prints in the PJM base residual auction, and the way fundamentally to fix this is to pay rates that are commensurate with the benefits that baseload power delivers to the power system.
Yeah, see, this is why I think your experience on the FERC is going to be very important at DOE, and of course I meant to include Washington State in making sure that that power is there and viable and available on the hottest day or the coldest day, whatever the needs may be. But again, I think that this kind of expertise is going to be very important as we address the issues in our our national grid.
It's critical, and without the deployment of sufficient generation, the United States, the Biden administration, and AI is not the only source of the demand that's rising, but it's a very important one. The Biden administration estimated that we were about 18 months ahead in AI development for the language training models in China. 18 months is the blink of an eye in utility planning terms, and there's real need to develop generation to meet that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and also Mr. Ranking Member. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Senator Cantwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just asking staff if they remember the last time that somebody voluntarily mentioned the Federal Power Act at a hearing, so thank you.
I would hope that I was that person.
You were. We'll go back in the record and search and see when the last time somebody brought it up. We often bring it up as members, but not a witness voluntarily, so I think it shows your prowess. So let me just jump right into it. As it relates to, we'll just stick on this subject for a second. Do you commit to opposing any proposal to auction off assets, including those owned by Bonneville Power Administration?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that? I had trouble hearing you.
We don't want to, BPA's unique situation.
Oh, Bonneville, yes.
You commit to not auctioning off any of the PMA assets, including those by Bonneville.
The power marketing administrations are fundamental components of the Department of Energy and provide electricity to huge swaths of territory in America. I love the power marketing administrations. I just don't know anything about. I know there have been talks at different times for the power marketing administrations to be privatized and like. I have no interest in that subject historically in my career, and I don't really know enough about that to give an informed answer here. It certainly isn't anything I've heard talked about recently. But
yeah, well, maybe, take a little homework assignment.
Yeah.
Bad idea. Okay, so PN&L, as it relates to grid modernization, chemistry, materials science, will you advocate for robust resources for our national labs to continue to play a role in the forefront of innovation as it relates to key energy national defense applications.
I think the national labs are fundamental to America's geostrategic position in the world, and on top of that, I'm just a really big fan of them.
Well, a lot of great work is being done there. I invite you to come also and see the fusion technology in the Pacific Northwest, 3 different fusion companies that are underway. I do think we have to think about this, like if the United States wants to run fast, if somebody creates, a miracle solution here, how do we get it integrated very quickly into the grid? So invite you to come and look at that. Hanford, very big issue for us, and Hanford cleanup. I'm concerned about the layoffs from DOGE and retirements, and so I don't want to lose qualified workers. One of the major obligations by the federal government is to live up to the tri-party agreement, and so will you commit to supporting a budget that meets the milestones of that agreement, which is previous energy secretaries committing to a plan for cleanup? So these are legal commitments that everybody has made. Our state, just as a state where this activity is housed and obviously concerned about the environmental contamination, played a key role in getting those agreements. But will you live up to a budget that lives up to the milestones of the agreement?
So fundamentally, the budgets are not the purview of the position to which I've been nominated, but I will say this, the cleanup of the legacy waste sites is one of the handful of the truly core missions of the department. And I have every intention of abiding by the agreement, and to the extent that the department has obligations to discharge, I will see them discharged properly.
So you would worry if, like, so many workers were laid off in the area that you didn't think you could meet those milestone agreements, that would be something you'd be concerned about?
Put another way, would I be concerned should I be confirmed, would I be concerned that we didn't have the workforce to discharge the duties that Congress gave us? Yes, but that would apply to virtually anything that we're told to do.
Thank you. I need to get to Ms. MacGregor. If I could, last year we spent 96 days out of the national preparedness levels at 4 and 5, which means we are using all of our available resources to fight fires. Over the last 10 years, that only happened in 2021. So we're very concerned about what this year's fire season is going to look like. And so we don't want to see a layoff of critical employees that are going to help us for the future. The department has a responsibility to fight here. Will you support how do you make sure that we have the workforce that we need as part of our incident command teams? And if confirmed, will you not support a reduction plan, including off-selling of public lands that would reduce our access?
Thank you for the question, Senator. I stated earlier that I think wildfire, and I think I stated in my last hearing, is one thing that actually keeps me up at night in this job, if confirmed, and that wildland firefighters are absolutely part of our essential workforce, and getting them out there is just as equally as wildland wildfire management efforts that the department, not only our department, states in partnership with us, local communities, the Department of Agriculture do to help give that toehold so that we can fight fire better and more effectively. And I absolutely will commit to you to work on wildland firefighting staffing to make sure we have what we need.
I'm asking you, the two of you are the first witnesses to come before us since all the DOGE, cuts. So I'm asking you specifically, will you stop any cuts that will affect wildland firefighting efforts?
I will absolutely evaluate any proposed cuts, should they be proposed for wildland firefighting cuts, and review those very closely. I can't imagine a situation where that would occur, but if it did, I would want to make sure that we're balancing and keeping the resources we need to fight fire.
Yeah, I think most of us would just be able to agree today. No one here wants those cuts. No one. We think we need more resources. We think we have a pretty good. You'll see a lot of Western members here, and we have a very good handle on what's happening. We've had to deal with it for a long time, and so we had to fight to get the money out of the deficit reduction and back into firefighting budget. That was a major bipartisan accomplishment, mostly led by this committee. And now we just want to keep moving forward. The Palisades fire is like, more than a wake-up call, more than a wake-up call. So we need more resources, not less. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Kimball. Senator McCormick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome to our nominees. Congratulations to both of you and your families. Mr. Danley, let me start with you. I'm thrilled to see a fellow Army man come before our committee, and we're talking a lot today about artificial intelligence and the importance of it for our economy, for our national security. To reap its full benefits of the AI revolution, we need power. We need an expansion of natural gas production and nuclear power in particular to power the next generation of AI. What do you think are the biggest challenges to expanding natural gas production and to increasing nuclear capacity in the United States?
Most of them are regulatory. The actual siting of generation is left to the states, as was alluded to earlier. But the regulatory burdens that attend the submission of any Section 7, that is NGA Section 7 natural gas pipeline, are so profound that the risk premiums make it almost impossible to allocate capital rationally. And so even though over the short and intermediate term, natural gas is the obvious solution to plug holes in resource adequacy, especially in areas that have constrained transmission systems, the biggest problem is the permitting of natural gas pipelines. And as far as nuclear goes, we recently had 2 new AP1000 units that went live in Georgia. My hope at the time had been that once the first company went through the minefield clearing the path, everybody would follow after them immediately, and that hasn't happened. And my understanding from the people I've talked to about it mostly is, first of all, AP1000s are really big, but the main problem is the rates paid on the back end in the markets. For any of the areas that the 2/3 of Americans served by the FERC markets, it is impossible to get rates paid, especially capacity prices, that are commensurate with the upfront costs and the long-term ongoing costs of running a nuclear power plant, even though the actual cost of delivered power is completely reasonable. It's everything that goes into the siting, construction, application, and permitting that's expensive, not to mention the after-the-fact litigation. And so really these are regulatory challenges primarily.
Very good, thank you. And Ms. MacGregor, good to see you the other day. We didn't talk about this, but I wanted to bring up the question of critical minerals, which are so necessary to our national security and to ensuring that we maintain a dominant position vis-a-vis China, our primary competitor. And China, as you know, is seeking to get control of rare mineral supply chains around the world with mineral extraction, processing, and refining. As you know also, domestically, many of those critical minerals lie on federal land. It takes years to develop these mining projects, and the constant delays and overzealous environmental regulations have in the past deterred investments in these capital-intensive projects. So what will you do? What can you do to tackle these challenges to spur mineral development in the United States?
Senator, that's a great question. And coming from Pennsylvania, which is one of the original mining states, I think it's incredibly important that our country continue to be a leader when it comes to mining, milling, and production. And in my past position at the Department of the Interior, I had the stress of reviewing the United States Geological Survey annual mineral commodity report that goes between 18 to 20 different mineral commodities every year, where we are nearly 100% reliant on foreign adversaries. And that worries me very much, especially when we have abundant resources here and smart regulations to be able to deploy them and mine them responsibly. And I personally, in the past, worked on lithium, a lithium mine in the state of Nevada. In my position in the department last time around, I envision that there are more opportunities in the future, and if confirmed, I really look forward to working on that because I think we need to be a leader.
Thank you. Mr. Dam, I'm going to try to squeeze in one more question about the national labs. This committee had a meeting about China and its attempt to infiltrate our universities, our national labs, as our primary adversary. As Deputy Secretary, what role do you expect to play in implementing hopefully more robust research security policies at DOE and across our national labs to make sure we're protecting against the risk of foreign researchers taking our innovation and technology elsewhere?
Yeah, so I think that's, when I first learned about the sheer volume of foreign researchers that came to the national labs, used the facilities in close proximity to the other researchers, I was really shocked by it. And when I further looked into it and found that there were very few, seemingly, at least by the press reports, press accounts, few constraints placed on that research being done and the choice and vetting of the people that arrive, I was again shocked by it. So I don't know the specific actions that I would take should I be confirmed, but it is something that I think is really serious and has to be dealt with immediately.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator King, did you have an additional question?
Yes, I wanted to follow up with a very productive discussion, Mr. Danley. First, I would mention that one of the bottlenecks, Senator, on natural gas is it takes 5 years to get a turbine. They're so backed up that that's a bottleneck in itself. If you wanted to build a gas turbine, you need at least 5 years, and then of course you got to do the ancillary transmission. But I wanted to talk about, we often use the word baseload. And you mentioned earlier in your exchange with Senator Masto that renewables, solar and wind, can play an important role in meeting this energy demand that's coming. And if you add storage, then you've got baseload. And I think one of the most important things that the department is doing is research into battery storage. I've learned recently that, you'll excuse the term, the availability of battery storage has exploded over the last 3 years.
Please don't use that term.
Sorry. It's expanded dramatically. How's that? Would you agree that this is an important area because solar and wind today are the cheapest forms of energy, about 3 cents a kilowatt hour all in, compared with other sources. Combined cycle is 3.5 cents, but other sources are much more. So, and they're also the fastest to the market. So I hope that you agree that storage is an important area of research and development in order to expand capacity on the grid from all sources.
Absolutely. Storage, research into storage is like all research, incremental, but the change in the effectiveness of batteries, the rate of discharge, and the total capacity availability has increased over time. If we could solve the technical engineering and cost elements to storage, that's not just a matter of allowing intermittent resources to have more continuous output. It also allows for the delivery of services to the bulk power system that otherwise would have to be provided directly by generation and could solve any number of transmission constraints that right now we have to have generators for.
Exactly. It could be a peaker. It could have all kinds of roles on stabilizing the grid.
It can provide ancillary services that just because of the geography and the topology of the system would otherwise only be fixed by putting in, let's say, a combustion turbine or something like that.
Well, the department is working on a number of initiatives at NREL and other places on battery development and technology. So I hope you'll be a cheerleader for that when you get to the department.
Should I be lucky enough to be confirmed, I will cheerlead the national labs, and I am completely behind the idea of trying to figure out the storage question.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any other questions on this side? Then I'm going to just proceed to mine. But congratulations to both of you. Thanks so much for taking the time to visit with me. Let's start with MacGregor. The Biden administration's Bureau of Land Management finalized what was the Rock Springs Resource Management Plan. They did it on the way out the door, December of 2024. It occurred not even a week after our Governor Mark Gordon, submitted his appeal to the proposed plan. The final plan is going to devastate the people of Southwest Wyoming, lock up millions of acres of land and the local communities the entire state rely upon. Governor, the state legislature, the county commissioners, the local communities all strongly oppose this plan that came out in the final days of the Biden administration. Will you commit to work with my office and the state to undo this disastrous plan?
Sir, I'm very familiar with that plan, and I want to say that the law itself has a really important consistency review that is required to be conducted by the BLM. And it concerns me when you have a resource management plan that you work on for years and your ultimate result is something that ends up inconsistent with what the state would like. I think that's something we can absolutely work with you on.
So in terms of before implementing the Biden administration's flawed plan, you're going to continue to work with us.
Absolutely.
Thank you. The resource management plan for Buffalo, Wyoming. The Biden administration finalized a resource management plan for Buffalo, Wyoming field office. That's going to ban new coal leasing in the Powder River Basin, the most energy-rich area in the country. This is a short-sighted decision, is an insult to Wyoming communities and harmful to the American energy security. If confirmed, would you work with me to reverse this plan?
Sir, yes, I will work with you on that plan as well.
On oil and gas leases, the previous administration, I believe, had a disgraceful record on oil and gas management. President Biden blocked production at every turn, deferred over 600,000 acres from leasing in Wyoming that were previously cleared for oil and gas production. Glad to see there is already a lease sale in Wyoming this year. I think it needs to continue. If confirmed, will you work to offer additional acres for leasing?
Sir, conducting lease sales is a requirement of the law. I will obey the law, and we will issue lease sales.
Great. In terms of sage grouse, Wyoming is home to a large population of the greater sage grouse and its habitat. For over 15 years, Wyoming has been at the forefront of adopting new management approaches to protect the species. Our state has led successful efforts to balance conservation with economic development. The Biden administration proposed to designate over 600,000 acres in Wyoming as areas of critical environmental concern, also known as the ASACs. This is going to lock up thousands of acres in Wyoming, halting production and development across the state. Would you be willing to reopen the department's greater sage grouse management?
Sir, we worked on the sage grouse resource management plans in the last administration, and I was interested to learn that this issue is remaining and needs to be addressed, and we will work with you on it.
In terms of federal grazing, the Department of the Interior plays a critical role in managing federal lands across the West. Almost half of the land in Wyoming is owned by the federal government. Land managed under multiple use is required to be managed without impairment of the productivity of the land. These are public places that people from Wyoming depend upon accessing for their livelihoods. Congress directed grazing, timber harvesting, recreation, as well as energy and mineral development to take place on these lands. Will you support the multiple use mandate of federal lands?
Absolutely, sir. That's the law.
Okay. With regard to the Colorado River Basin, the Colorado River flows through 7 states, and the upper basin includes Wyoming, Colorado, New Mexico, and Utah. We need short and long-term solutions that provide Westerners the water that we need. More water storage, improved federal flexibility, better data, improved forecasting can help accomplish these goals. What do you think is the role of the department in these negotiations between the Colorado River basins, which are currently ongoing?
Sir, it sounds like I'll be spending a lot of time in Wyoming.
We appreciate it. We'd love to have you.
I think the role of the department is ensuring that we have a responsible solution that provides for the 40 million people who rely upon that water, but the solution must be state-based.
Okay. With regard to the grizzly bear is fully recovered. Greater Yellowstone ecosystem population of grizzly bear has been fully recovered for 20 years. Wyoming is proud of the role that we played in leading the recovery. Population has been delisted 2 times under both Democrat and Republican administration. It has been relisted by a federal judge. The only thing that Presidents Biden, Obama, Trump, and Bush all agreed on is that the grizzly bear is fully recovered. But we have federal judges who are taking a different approach. The Endangered Species Act was passed by Congress to protect species from extinction. Does it make sense for the federal government to manage and waste taxpayer dollars on a species that is in no danger of being extinct?
Sir, I believe we're borrowing some great talent from the state of Wyoming to assist us on a lot of these issues, especially as it relates to the grizzly bear and the science behind that decision.
Mr. Danley, congratulations to you as well. Let's talk about advanced reactor demonstration projects, nuclear energy. Developing first-of-its-kind technology requires time and resources. This is especially true for nuclear energy. The Department of Energy's Advanced Reactor Demonstration Program is meant to help developers overcome these hurdles. It's work that's begun in earnest during the first Trump administration. The program was designed into law by President Trump, was signed into law by President Trump. Look forward to continuing this good work and getting the current projects over the finish line. If confirmed, will you ensure the Department of Energy remains committed to this mission?
Both the President and the Secretary have expressed their enthusiasm for next-gen reactors. I think they're almost certainly going to be part of any solution we have to meeting power demand. I have every intention of supporting the program and working with you on it.
Great. So Russian uranium. Last year, Congress passed legislation to ban imports of Russian uranium into the United States. Laws intended to revive American uranium production and strengthen our nuclear fuel supply chain. This is needed to reliably supply critical baseload power plants. The legislation must be implemented correctly. The Department of Energy has the discretion to provide waivers to companies seeking to import uranium from Russia. Do you agree that waivers should be used only as a last resort?
We need to remove our reliance for uranium on other countries. It's very difficult to have affordable, reliable, and secure energy if the fundamental inputs are in the hands of either adversarial or even hostile nations. And I absolutely agree that the waivers are designed only for use in extremis when you have to have the fuel.
All right. Because we're now seeing that sales of nuclear material are coming from China.
Which are coming from Russia.
Which are coming from Russia, exactly. I'm glad you know that, yes. Because the first Trump administration recognized our dependence on uranium imports to fuel our nuclear reactors as a national security risk. It convened the Nuclear Fuel Working Group to develop recommendations to address the issue. As an extension of the work in 2023, Congress passed the Nuclear Fuel Security Act to rebuild our nation's nuclear fuel supply chain. Congress repurposed $2.72 billion in 2024 in funding to support this goal. If confirmed, will you make it a priority to build and secure our nuclear fuel supply chain, including enrichment and conversion?
Senator, the entire supply chain from beginning to end for nuclear power has to be absolutely resilient and redundant within the United States, and the Department of Energy would not be fully discharging its functions if it didn't work on that.
But before ending this hearing, any other questions? Thank you. So for the record, I will ask you 3 questions addressed to each nominee before the committee. Will you be available to appear before the committee and other congressional committees to represent departmental positions and respond to issues of concern to Congress?
I will.
I will.
Are you aware of any personal holdings, investments, or interests that could constitute a conflict or create the appearance of such a conflict should you be confirmed and assume the office to which you've been nominated by the President?
I'm aware of no conflicts.
Sir, aside from the ones I disclosed when I discussed and will divest, no, there will be no conflicts.
Okay. Are you involved or do you have any assets held in blind trusts?
No.
No.
Thank you. I want to thank the witnesses, congratulate you, thank you for your testimony. All senators, we had a very good turnout for the questioning today. Questions for the record of the hearings are due by 6 p.m. this evening. The hearing is adjourned. Thank you.